Welcome back. You're watching Invest Africa. We're still exploring the oil and gas sector on the continent, and with me in studio is Paul Eardley-Taylor of Oil and Gas Southern Africa at Standard Bank. Norman Ndaba is Director of Energy, Chemicals and Utilities at Ernest Young. Rajen Reddy is CEO at KZN Oils, and joining us now from our Nairobi bureau is Abdullahi. He's Vice President for Business Development at Tembo Petroleum. Thanks so much, Ali, for joining us, and we'll be getting to you in just a bit. Before we do, Paul, let's pick up with you. Moving from west to east, I mean, a lot of the foreign investment flow that we have seen come into the continent, into the oil and gas arena specifically, off the East Coast. Talk us through what you're seeing, envisaging here, and what your expectations are as far as impact is concerned and potential for that revenue to filter through into the broader economies.
Sure. I think one of the most interesting things is the activities being offshore and onshore. Mozambique we've talked about already. Tanzania has probably found in the order of 25 TCF of gas, and it's rising. But what you also have is the discoveries of oil. So Uganda's discoveries were made 5, 6, 7 years ago. Kenya has had a couple of successful exploration wells, and then of course the South Sudan. So really, if you take the 5 countries together, not to mention Ethiopia as well, where there's a lot of activity, you very much have the possibility for a new hub for oil and gas being created regionally. The interesting thing about this particular region, though, is the absence of infrastructure for the most part for transporting the hydrocarbons. In the case of Tanzania and Mozambique, the discoveries will be coastal, and the infrastructure has to be coastal. But for the inland, so Uganda, to some extent Kenya, and also South Sudan, the challenge of designing, constructing and developing the infrastructure to connect the resources with the coast and with global markets will be fascinating. And then the question is obviously how much of the cash flows will stay within country, and how much of the products will stay within country, and how much will be exported.
Norman, so we've got various pull and push factors simultaneously at play when it comes to the East African region. We've got infrastructure deficits holding things back to an extent, but then when we were in the first part of the show, you highlighted ease of doing business, is looked at very cautious, with much scrutiny, and ease of doing business is well rated when it comes to that entire East African bloc.
Absolutely. Over the last 8 years, the East Africa bloc has really moved to enable its business environment to be able to do business. And because of that, we've seen a large investment going into East Africa. And from a world ranking point of view, all the 5 countries in East Africa are moving up relative to their peers in the rest of Africa.
One of those players is Tembo Petroleum. So, Ali, let's bring you into the conversation at this point. East Africa, the new territory to conquer in this space. Your sense of your position within this rapidly evolving sector of the East African economy?
Yes, if you look at the East African sector, I mean, 10 years ago there was not much activity as far as oil exploration and gas is concerned. If you look at the Eastern Corridor, starting from Mozambique to Tanzania to Kenya, you find that Mozambique today is approaching almost 200 TCF of gas. 6 years ago or 7 years ago, they barely had 6 TCF of gas of proven reserves. So a lot of money needs to be spent on exploration. And then, of course, the other things which once you discover, things like infrastructure is very important. From our point of view, we see that Mozambique may become the next Qatar because of its possibility of having huge gas deposits. Further north, when you go from Mozambique to Tanzania to Kenya, and then into Somalia, which apparently I come from and where Tembo Petroleum is trying to get involved in, there's a lot of possibility of Somalia holding close to 100 TCF of gas or more. But we require a lot of exploration to be done, and we need the whole place to be de-risked. The current UK-Somali conference, which was held recently in London, has assisted Somali government in trying to make its businesses investment proactive. And we hope that investors can see that Somalia is a new place to invest in. And there's going to be a conference very soon in Nairobi soon.
Of course, what would provide added incentive for investing in these territories, Ali, would be support when it comes to regulatory framework for one. So let's pick up on what Norman had touched on earlier. Just how easy is it doing business in the East African domain?
I think that's the rest of me. The East African domain is quite reasonable as far as the regulatory environment is concerned, because you look at Tullow Oil and Africa Oil. I think they've done a discovery of about 2.5 billion, and they're going of reserves estimated for possibility, and there's going to be a lot of money spent on production and further exploration. So they're working under a legislative framework, which apparently the new oil law in Kenya will come into effect very soon. But apart from that, I think it's a good environment to work in. If you go to Tanzania, it's the same thing with Start Oil. If you go to Mozambique, it's the same thing. I think the environment, if you look at the legal framework, is quite reasonable in the East African region.
Rajen, let's take the infrastructure story a step further here into the setting up of our own refineries. Does it make sense where the argument has been that refineries that we do have are not running at full capacity and they would need to meet economies of scale in order to present viable options?
Yeah, that's a very interesting statement because our refineries are old also. You must bear in mind. I mean, we've been through the clean fuels one, now we got to go to the second one that comes into operation in 2017. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to also come to the economies of scale in getting a good sized refinery. And it's always not so glamorous and always say not so romantic to worry about a refinery. You've got to worry about the economies of scale to process your crude. And I think that is something the countries of Africa, they dream and should not be about a refinery. Mm-hmm. It's how to process the crude at the most economical point, the cost. And PetroSA is coming into the market in our country, and with their refinery, and to process around 400,000 barrels a day, 500,000 barrels a day. That's brilliant. That's super. And I think that will give us the economies of scale. You've got the other African countries that Nigeria, sadly, their refineries never seem to perform, never seem to work.
And in fact, that's where the lessons are derived. So, Paul, just to end off with, I mean, if these resources are not well managed here, it may not well benefit the country. So take us through how, in your view, a country should be managing oil riches so that it works to the benefit to develop other investments, so that it works to catalyze other investment in the broader economy.
Well, there are examples out there of how it works. I mentioned the Norwegian example and also Brazil, which people quote. One of the things that have developed over the last 20 years and where Mozambique is currently going at the moment is to have a national master plan as to how to mobilise, organise the resources and all the associated infrastructure. And in their particular case, these documents are put on the internet, they're public domain, they have forms of debate and consultation as to what's the best way the country should go with its resources, how to balance the demand for the product, the funding requirement, and how much should be spent socially and locally. So that's one example. There are others out there, but really I think consultation, transparency is the way to stop an oil curse of the past becoming the future.
Absolutely.